Lewis, can you give us our thoughts on why a soul would incarnate as homosexual or transgender?
Thank you for that question. Why would a separate self or soul incarnate as anything, actually? We incarnate, we project into form in this dualistic world to really make known the forgotten. And there are many ways that we can learn to remember ourselves. And every way that we remember ourselves has to go through what we would call the dark night of the soul, has to go through the breaking down of the separate self ego identity. And so very often we choose lives, we choose to project or incarnate into lives where we're going to experience some form of judgment or oppression. Now, the world is majority heterosexual. And so human beings find anything to judge, any form of judgment, any form of difference to judge with. So we judge people on the basis of color. We judge based on sexual identity, masculine, feminine. So for years, the feminine has been objectified and subjugated to treatment, negative treatment by the masculine. And so when the separate self, as now it's fractured into billions of beings, these billions of beings are what we call spirit beings or souls, which then project into physicality. We learn to remember what we are through adversity. And that adversity comes always in the form of some form of separation, feeling separated or different from the rest. Separation leads to this feeling of abandonment or rejection. So abandonment, rejection, and then of course feelings of inadequacy, not feeling good enough, not being good enough. And so very often homosexuality is a way that we can set up a lesson where we feel rejected, where we feel unwanted, unworthy, different too. So primarily that lesson will lead to lessons of learning to love the self, even though you are rejected by often your parents or society, or the homophobes or the racists in the world. And so often we will choose lives in a specific body orientation, whether it be female, male, with a sexual preference, and it will become in our formative years very often the beginning of the judgment we take upon ourselves. So people judge us and we accept those judgments, even though we feel differently about ourselves. We'll accept their judgments as a valid judgment, and we'll wonder what's wrong with us. And then we'll spend the rest of our lives trying to overcome or justify those judgments, only to finally realize that it's all about self-love. Now, the reasons that a soul also will incarnate and choose a male body that's homosexual or a female body is that in most of our incarnations, we will start off in a certain sexual gender. So we'll incarnate as masculine several times, and then we'll want to understand how it feels to play from the other sexual roles. So a soul that has been male several times will then incarnate as female for the first time, but all its previous incarnations, it's been attracted to females. Now it's in a female body, and it finds that its attractive energy is still to females. So it will be a double lesson there. It will be a lesson in loving unconditionally, and then also overcoming the prejudices that come with the challenges of being a homosexual from the judgment point of view. Now, once you're in a society and once you've matured and accepted yourself and you form part of a social group or society where you're accepted for your sexual orientation, then life becomes easier. Challenges is that regardless of where you go, there's always going to be a judgment. So whether it be based on color or sex, the judgments come. So souls choose these sexual orientations very often simply to learn to overcome the judgment. Now that homosexuality is generally widely accepted, souls have now pushed that boundary a little further, and now we get into the transgender, which is something new for society to learn to accept. And so there's another form of judgment now, and not only amongst heterosexuals towards homosexuality or towards transgender, but even within the homosexual societies, there are challenges and judgments there. So it's always to do with judgment. And yet it's judgment that brings us to the place of learning to forgive. First, you forgive to let go of hanging on to the burden of the judgment itself. Then you forgive from a place of realizing that you called forth this experience to bring you into understanding. Then you forgive yourself for having created this. And finally, you get to the place of realizing that the self is perfect. We are collectively one self, and there is no judgment. And yet it's judgment that's brought about forgiveness, that's brought about understanding, and therefore made us self-realize as the self, the Holy Son of God self, that which is I am, that which is made from the exact same essence as our Creator. So yes, we choose some challenging lives in order to learn to love unconditionally.